this roundtable. My name is Andre Nongerma, and I'm the chief of the Geospatial Information Management section at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. And we are located in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Just a few words on the ECA. For those who are not familiar with the institutions, is one of the 3 regional African institutions, and we are the regional arm of the United Nations in the African continent, with mandate to support our member state development priority, mainly regional integration and advancement of economic and social progress in Africa. We provide technical advisory services to our member state, but we also have a function of convening dialogue across member state, and also thinking ahead in appraising methodology, practices, policy we share with our member state. Having said that,
I think we have lost Andre there.
Yeah, I think it's internet connectivity issues he's having. Maybe let's give him a second or two. Oh, we've lost him completely. Okay, so I think we're gonna just have to deal with it. Some technology challenges, of course, coming on. So moving on swiftly before Andre comes back, I have the pleasure to introduce to you Miss Laura Mugeha. Please have the floor.
Hey, hi everyone. I'm Laura, and I am based in Nairobi, in Kenya. I currently work with Code for Africa as a community coordinator for African Drone and Sensors Africa, and they basically initiatives that are focusing on using drones for good and low-cost sensors for environmental monitoring. But before this, I am a geospatial engineer by training, and my interests are majorly on open data and free and open source software, and how different communities and groups can use this for good. I've worked before with youth mappers as a regional ambassador, where basically the focus was on on capacity building for university students, so that they are aware of these technologies that we'll be talking about today, to use for research and also for community projects. Happy to be here today with everyone else to discuss more. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. I think I'm also having a bit of internet connectivity, and for one moment I lost you, but I think the introduction is well captured, and we'll come back to you. So please, I want to introduce to you Miss Sophie Mawa. Please have the floor.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you for having me here today. I just want to see a quick show of hands. Maybe you can use the reaction option on the Zoom, or maybe put a yes or a thumbs up in the chat. But who has heard of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team in this room? A couple. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Thank you. So a few of you have heard about Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. So great, thanks, Charles. the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team is an organization that acts as a catalyst. It really bridges the gap between citizen-generated open geospatial data and the use of that data. So we kind of sit at the intersection between those two things. Now, we've recently established 4 regional hubs, one in Eastern Southern Africa, which is where I'm based, one in Western Northern Africa, one in Asia Pacific, and one in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have a wealth of kind of experience in the geospatial space, and we develop lots of different tools and technologies and advocate for the use of open data tools and technologies to generate open geospatial data for humanitarian and social development. So before working at HOT, I was working with the University of Cambridge for one of their implementation partners called the Centre for Global Equality, and we worked predominantly in open tools and technology, not in geospatial, but in open tools and technology. And I was stationed in Bahidar in Ethiopia, and we established a makerspace there to really think about how you work with communities and with individuals that are actually using the technology to develop the best kind of technology that works for them. Now, that background is important because what it means is that I bring a level of expertise to the table, and you'll hear me say this constantly across the session today, is that we shouldn't just be investing in open geospatial data and technology. We should be investing also in the people that are using open geospatial and technology. And this is something that I feel really passionate about. So I am the Senior Manager for Strategic Engagement and Growth at the Eastern and Southern Africa Open Mapping Hub, which is a part of HOT. And I lead a portfolio of programs that focus on sustainable cities and communities as one thematic area, and disaster response and climate resilience as another thematic area. So that portfolio of programs, you can come and talk to me afterwards about if you're interested, but largely they kind of focus on, as I said, investment in growing people and places. So that might be facilitating grants to organizations who are advancing the map, or integrating open data systems and workflows to improve their internal systems and workflows. So that might be generating open data to understand where people are for a malaria spraying campaign, for example. Other programs include the Spatial People Network, which is a network that's designed for youth. So that's kind of students and early career researchers to offer training opportunities, not only in geospatial, but also in entrepreneurial skills, because for us to be able to have communities that are sustainable, that are driving forward the open data agenda, they also need to have those additional skills like advocacy, like public speaking, like writing grants, for example. So again, really investing in the people who sit behind the use of the technology. And then the other kind of program that I run is a collaborative climate campaign, which runs campaigns to generate open data specifically for a data user. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But yes, thank you for having me. It's great to see Andre back. Maybe I can pass back to Andre. Andre, we lost you.
Oh, thank you, Sophie. I cannot even tell to myself what's happened because I still have the connection in office, and yeah, it's happened sometimes like that. Sorry for that. And I was speaking about ECA and our role there as a geospatial component with the mandate to harness data information product in support of regional initiatives, and also in support of our member state in terms of helping them to build, first of all, the data foundations that are required, and also putting in place some of the policies and institutional arrangement at national level and also at regional level for geospatial information production, use, and sharing in African country. My role over the last, I might say 20 years, has been to promote what we call national spatial data infrastructure, and now moving slowly or transitioning to what we call integrated geospatial information framework being put in place and established by the United Nations to ensure a cooperative management of geospatial information across the world, and more specifically in developing country and in the African continent. We work in a way that national spatial data infrastructure are the backbone of geospatial information development in Africa, and this provide the appropriate way of making data available to users in transparency, in free and restricted access as far as possible. And this is typically what we call openness of geospatial information data, and is truly aligned with the discussion we'll be having over this afternoon. But let me start by outlining quickly some principles for me that are critical to open geospatial data. From where I'm sitting, we see that the major principle is to ensure that data is considered as a good, meaning making ubiquitous availability of spatial data and information as a common good for the community at national and global level. We can see that currently people have access to data they use, and even they permanently produce a series of open data, geospatial data through portals, what we have in our smartphone, and other navigation system, virtual globes, and so on and so forth. And then when we talk about open geospatial data, my understanding is that the first difference we need to make is to consider the one between the data provided by public authorities like National Mapping Agency and the open data provided or obtained through crowdsourcing. I was listening very shortly to what Sophie was talking about, and my sense is that government, African governments in particular, must provide access to information either free or at a reasonable cost, so that users can be able to appraise and use this data according to their own need. My second point to fill the discussion is, if I might say, data by all, for all, and from everyone, from all people, and of course increasing community participation in the data collections, as well in their processing, their analysis, and their use is critically important to ensure openness of geospatial data set. And linked to that, of course, we cannot overlook the need to promote responsible production and use of this data with the privacy, the intellectual property right and liability related to this data. And the last thing I wanted to point out at this point is having the data maybe at hand. That means that we need to be able to search and discover what exists. This doesn't necessarily means free and uninterrupted access to data, to all data by all users at all time, which of course is nice to have, but for that to happen, we need to develop or foster a streamlined electronic or online delivery of this data, the services, so that we can collectively achieve more strengthen or enhance customer services. We can also quicken some of the response time, make our operation more efficient, and above all, lowering some of the transaction costs need to related to access and use of data. And I believe that this means and way of having data at hand is slowly a clear shift from analyzing and presenting data in a discrete way, discrete data set we used to have in a maps, then slowly moving to streaming of data in real times, and this is a great shift that's give relevance to openness of geospatial data sets. So I can stop here for now, and we can take it further as we proceed. Thank you. Over to you, Vivian.
Thank you so much, Andre, Sophie, and Laura, for your very, very comprehensive introductory remarks. It's really exciting to see the level of expertise that we have on the room today, and I hope the audience is already getting excited into some of these issues that have been already spoken into. I think there's a lot of very useful emphasis on the useful need of capacity development in open geospatial technologies, the involvement and inclusivity of communities with regards to data collection mechanism, and also the overall justification and lobby to government to start to visualize that some of these actual data sets can be available and prepared or presented to different communities and packaged a lot more as a public good and not maybe as a conserve of just government entities. I think a lot of times you've had very, very many talks around data being regarded as the new oil or new gold, and particularly when you start looking into the aspects of the pros and cons of having availability of some of this geospatial data to be presented in an open and free environment in order to promote and also to just ensure that we are creating an necessary environment for innovation processes to actually take up, where you actually get to understand that there's more value in terms of having various data sets, open geospatial data sets, and with location, of course, being a very critical aspect of what is happening in our day-to-day lives. Then you begin to see that the next frontier of innovations really can only be driven a lot more by availability of some of this data. Historically, of course, looking at how some of these challenges that are happening, for instance, on ground or on earth have been happening, and what is happening today and what the future holds. And I think that really captures a little bit more on, a lot more on the kind of vision we had for this session in regards to understanding how the geospatial, open geospatial community and network availability of these technologies and data have evolved historically, particularly looking at the last 5 years, and also moving on to what is current and the kind of opportunities that lay forward. And of course, not forgetting with some of these technological advancements, that therefore comes a lot more challenges, of course. The more we innovate, the more, of course, challenges that we're also facing. And we need to critically now look back and take stock of how some of these challenges can actually be reinvented or re-innovated moving forward. So I will throw it back again and start us off, and particularly also get to hear from Laura, for instance, what your experience has been in the last 5 years with regards to open geospatial data, how you have been involved in this development, what you think the status of things look like at this point, what the priorities look for you, and maybe just to name but a few, some of the successful examples that you have actually taken note of. I think some of them are already sitting in this room, of course, mentioned by all three of our panelists, but we'd also like to hear a lot more if there's any other successful solutions, key priority areas that you actually think are something we can write home about. So over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Vivian. So over the past few years, I think what I have really appreciated is the diversity of open geospatial data that's now currently accessible. Just from moving from having the Landsat archives when it comes to Earth observations data, to having more companies that even maybe providing satellite imagery that's of higher spatial resolutions and even temporal resolutions, opening up their data and releasing even more archives for people to use. And also just even moving from Earth observations alone, but seeing also a lot of what we call in the Geospatial vector data being openly available. So from just having data from government entities, which maybe looked a lot like administrative data, but actually having a lot of organizations releasing some of the data that they have used for different programs and initiatives that could be useful. And I also like that most of this data is usually like sector specific. So you get like data in healthcare, in the environmental monitoring space, and all of that. So the diversity of what's available is really impressive. But also, I think what has also driven or advanced this is actually the technology. So over the last few years, there's been a huge push for cloud-based infrastructure because of these cloud platforms. It's how we are easily able to quickly access this data and use it quickly over the internet without even having to download the data and get specific software installed in our laptops for use. So right now, it's very easy to access analysis-ready data, to work with that data over the internet, and be able to get insights quickly for different initiatives. And that's really been impressive to see. I think one of the things that I've seen over the last 2 years is the creation of the Cloud Native Geospatial Foundation. We're working on really amazing things when it comes to working on the cloud geospatial data. And most of that is in open formats, even things like GeoParquet, which are like open geospatial standards that are really changing the space. Then one more thing, obviously, that I would mention, which I think Sophie and also Andrea had already mentioned, is on like citizen engagement and citizen science. So platforms like OpenStreetMap that are allowing for people that are not necessarily working in the geospatial space, or people with geospatial backgrounds, to actually come in together to build geospatial data and make it available. And what we've seen with that is even more accessibility and more innovation when it comes to how data is generated and geospatial data specifically, and also now seeing the data being used. Because when sort of, I'd say the open geospatial space started, and what we'd see is a lot of people in the space just creating the data, releasing the data. But when you have like people from different backgrounds coming in, I think what we've seen more is people actually using the data to solve challenges that we see on a day-to-day basis. So if it's, say, using healthcare data to actually advocate for more health facilities to be built in by governments or to support their decision-making. So citizen science has really improved the space. Then the last thing that I could mention is also open source software. I had previously at the free and open source geospatial conference that happens every year, there's someone who was once giving a keynote, and they say data is good, but data is useless without software. So if we have the data and people cannot process it to be able to get insights from it, or for it to be able to inform some good or work on the ground, then it's sort of useless. And for us to be able to do that, we need all these platforms and software applications to enable us to work with this data. So free and open source software has also complemented the availability of this data to make sure that we're actually getting insights from it and see what the data is saying, and also identify any gaps. So I think the FOSPO-G movement has really grown. That has also meant that we're able then to work with the data and see any gaps, see how we can improve it and actually use it for good. And I'd say that also so much more. I think one more thing is also just the collaboration and what we can borrow from other open spaces. So when it comes to things like open science, where they've built a lot of principles, things like the fair data principles that we can borrow in and look at when building the open geospatial space have been key priorities that have sort of led to the success of what we are seeing right now. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you.
Thank you, Laura. And I think maybe I'll also ask Andre and Sophie, maybe to share if there's any specific additional comments. Maybe starting with you, Sophie, any key priorities, successes, very successful examples you can highlight as well to top it up?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Laura has kind of captured so many of the things from a kind of technological perspective. So thank you, Laura, for bringing all of that up. And I agree completely. But I think that there's also like things, if we kind of take a bit of a zoom out and look at the sector as a whole, and when I talk about the sector, I mean the kind of tech for good, tech for development. There's a couple of things that I also wanted to highlight. So first of all, many governments, national governments across Eastern and Southern Africa have really committed to open data as being a key part of their agenda going forward. 50% of more than 50% of the 26 countries that the Eastern and Southern Africa Open Mapping Hub works with have all made this very kind of public commitment to open data. So that's one thing I wanted to highlight. And then from a kind of another zoomed out perspective, we're also seeing a commitment from other big players to open geospatial data. For example, with the launch of Overture, no matter how we kind of feel about it independently, but, you know, having organizations like Amazon Web Services, Meta, Microsoft, TomTom, all committing to open data, that's another really strong asset. And I think it's a great opportunity for us as a sector to be able to collaborate with some of these organizations who have a huge amount of influence, whether or not we agree with it. So that's something that I wanted to add as well. And I agree with Laura entirely in terms of the shift in technologies kind of moving more towards this very much open, you know, high quality open source data and information. But what we're also seeing, what we're also seeing is a kind of a shift in the rhetoric around in the kind of humanitarian funding space as well. So funders are really looking at lower barriers for entry. They're looking at, you know, how can we make sure that we are actually connecting local people to local challenges and enabling them to use the data that they're creating in an open setting to be able to have a positive impact on the lives of the people in their locality. And I just wanted to pick up on something that Andre said earlier around data for all is a really important piece of this puzzle. And yes, because data and knowledge is power. And what you do by being able to lower the barrier of entry for some of these kind of smaller community groups that want to advocate for local change is that you're really seeing that kind of that breakdown of granting and of providing opportunities for those kind of smaller groups. I think, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, loads of those organizations are constantly at conferences saying, we need to break down the barriers to entry so that groups can come in and contribute to open data. And I really think that that's happening. So yeah, we're seeing much more of that. And then the final point I wanted to make, sorry for taking up a bit too much airtime, but the final point I wanted to make was that we're also seeing more efforts in the open geospatial state around in open geospatial technologies and communities around inclusivity. And I think that this is a really important one as well, because many times, and I don't know what the experience of other people on the call has been, but you start talking about open data and often people are a bit kind of allergic to it. They don't really know what it is. And there's a lot of distrust around open data and open data methodologies. But as we're building more inclusivity and allowing more people to contribute in a way that's more straightforward, more intuitive, more contextual based on where they're from and how they're accessing the technology, we're able to kind of build up these communities in a way that is really having sustained impact. And I know that Laura's had loads of experience with that, with working with youth mappers. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Yeah, over to Andre.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I know that everything is almost said on the technology side of the openness of data, but let me bring you to the most important part, if I might say like that, the policy side, because whatever the technology, whatever the capacity, whatever the data you want to share or make available, if you don't have the, I might say, the political buy-in and the appropriate framework, you can be stuck on that. So from our side, at the Economic Commission for Africa, we are sitting more on this aspect of helping country to evolve policy on geospatial information, assisting country to put the appropriate frameworks that will help them have a cooperative management of geospatial information at national level and also at the regional level. And for many years, I said it at the beginning, we have been pushing country to put in place the national spatial data infrastructure. But for the last 5 to 6 years back, the UN has established or started building what we call integrated geospatial information framework. And this is a kind of breakthrough in terms of ensuring that country proceed in developing geospatial information at national level in 3 ways. First of all, in putting in place a kind of overarching strategic framework, which is a guiding policy that have been developed at the global level to ensure that member states can scale this overarching strategic framework into country-level action plan. And many countries in Africa have started developing this country-level action plan, has a national policy on geospatial information. And what is critically important is that the integrated geospatial information framework is now lifted at the same level within the United Nations Economic Council, like the SDGs, meaning that is the framework country might embrace slowly and start building upon that. And this framework has non-strategic pathway. We call non-strategic pathway in the sense that it encompasses component on data, on technology, on capacity, on innovation, communications, governance and institutions, legal and policy, and of course financial, because we still need the money to ensure that things are working. This is from my point of view, a new trend that will strengthen what we are doing to ensure that data are made fully available, accessible to the community of user, and we can articulate whatever we do, either from the government side or either from the community of users. We can articulate what we do within this framework so that we have a seamless cooperation or collaboration in the management of development information at national level. We need this strong institutional arrangement within the national data ecosystem, because it's the only way where we can build the consensus among the data producers and also with the data users, and ensure that we have an appropriate designation of custodian of national geospatial dataset and information resources. Without that, whatever the innovation, whatever the technology, whatever the data we can create will not fully work, because we still have the competition for power at national level in holding and in and is in owning some of the national development data. I believe this complement what Laura and Sophie has said on the technological side, and we should keep this also into consideration when talking about the openness of geospatial data set. Over to you, Vivian.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a very, very, very useful, very informative, and very convincing, I think, first round of responses, where we were looking to evaluate, of course, the key areas, key priorities, key successes that we have actually seen in the development of open geospatial data. And our panelists, of course, Andre, Sophie, and Laura have definitely spoken a lot more into the very fundamental principles. It's good to actually hear from the different panelists on the steps that have actually been made around the technology advancements, around the data advancements, around the policy advancements, which in a lot of very many instances you find in developing countries is something that is probably forgotten or left behind. So in a spirit of leaving no one behind, which I think the UN, of course, led by the UN strategies and the integrated geospatial framework that is being developed, I think that is a very, very insightful and very clear pathway that we all seem to resonate very well with. And particularly also just thinking around the evolution of open data, now going into more of open data, open knowledge, open science mechanism, so that it's not about just providing the data sets, but it's also more into, it speaks into having some of this open geospatial science, having the open knowledge around how the processing or the algorithms that are actually used in the generation of some of these data sets are actually delivered, so that we don't no longer just look at the output at the end of it all and accessibility to the output, but also ensure that we create capacities to ensure that different entities are well capacitated to have the actual, for lack of a better word, the actual model implementation or scientific algorithms that went into the creation of some of these data sets, as well as to even some of the raw sources of some of this data. I think it's a good time, ladies and gentlemen, to just have a round, maybe any comments, questions coming from the floors. We have about 20 participants and counting. And more, I know, are also joining us through YouTube. Some are actually watching through the various social media channels and have actually not joined in here. So that actually could mean that we actually have a lot more numbers. Any comments? Kindly put your hand up and I will invite you to take the microphone from the floor. Questions? I think it was it's good that we had such a great diversity in terms of the expertise. So a lot of us actually sharing, and Laura particularly speaking to the work she's been doing with the youth mappers, Sophie speaking into the humanitarian aspects and development initiatives, and of course, Andre. So I see Chris. Please have your microphone on and shoot your question.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Viviane and Meta. I'm not a data person. I'm not a geospatial expert, and I consume data, especially for planning, especially for communities that we work with, especially in urban areas and peri-urban areas. And I want to just ask if the revolution of open data, actually open data for geosplanning, can be an effective way of making sure that services within the informal settlement are properly distributed in an equitable way that can promote sustainable development goals. And it can only work if the special plan is also backed with a transformed policy and a secure land tenure. So as we speak about special plan, there's also need to speak about the land tenure right, because they always, planning that happens in a land where the land is not secure, where there's no security of tenure, where the ownership is in dispute, where the land laws are not regulated well, then the special planning still might have challenges from my view. That's my take. It might be a question and a comment.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's amazing to see some of the already application areas coming, of course, from the availability of open geospatial data. And I know you talked about you not being an expert, particularly in data, but I believe planning is one of the downstream applications or beneficiaries of sufficient open geospatial data. And I think based on your question, which was more also of a comment, I think it makes it very easy for us to think through particularly the availabilities of some of these data sets and how particularly they can be integrated into the actual implementations of very specific for planning purposes and decision-making processes. So I will shoot the question maybe to Andre, maybe to respond in 1 minute.
Yes, of course, geospatial data set can be a good asset in terms of developing land information management system within the cities or within even targeting more specifically the slum and not well planned area. in terms of providing the data that we need to develop a planning strategy and also to develop a governance strategy in reaching out to this area. And of course, there are many available techniques, methods, or information products that have been developed in this area, and might be useful in the planning of the services stage to know where people are, where the need are, and what are required to do in terms of scenarios or what if scenario. And this is maybe where geospatial data can bring value addition to the work of city planners. My understanding of the question is that there is no doubt that the spatial component is critically important to have a good sense of the situation, the issues, and provide us with also mean of analyzing, especially analyzing the situation and making good decision out of it, because geospatial can help you do some kind of scenario, what if scenario, and then you can easily get some of the responses you are looking for. Data from various aspects of geospatial information, either Earth observations, measurements on the ground using GPS or mapping, will provide you with a synoptic, holistic vision of your area to manage. And this is critically very important at the stage of the planning process. Not sure if I respond exactly to what you are doing, but I know that the other who are working on the open data at the city levels might have more addition on how people collecting data, even in the slum, help understand some of the patterns, the urban patterns in their neighborhood, and then can help very well in the planning processes. Over to you, Vivian.
Absolutely, yes. Sophie and Laura, I think feel free to chime in at this point if you have any comments or responses as well.
Laura?
Okay.
Laura, do you want to go ahead or shall I?
You can go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris, for this question. Unfortunately, my connection dropped quickly when you said where you were joining us from today. So it would be great if you could just let me know in the chat where in terms of location and where in terms of organization. And the reason why I'm asking that question is because so the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team has done a lot of mapping in informal settlements. There's been lots of different projects around the world, Brazil, Tanzania, Kenya, to name a few. And I think what you're kind of asking about is actually one of the most kind of difficult challenges that we have kind of, I would say, across the sector, because in informal settlements, there's a real geospatial data can identify challenges. It can identify, fantastic, thank you. It can identify challenges. It can identify where there might be lacking of services, where there might be lacking of resources, where there might be contaminated water points or high risk of fire or whatever those challenges might be. But the interlink, the bit that actually solves the problem, has been one of the most difficult things, because that's about people and behavior change. So as long as you, and I agree with what Andre was saying, as long as you take a really holistic approach and come to the challenge, like a map won't solve a problem. What solves the problem is the person behind using the map. So to be able to make that connection and that link between, okay, how does our identification of contaminated water points in Kibera slum, for example. How does that genuinely and actively how can that be genuinely and actively solved by either people in the slums or the people that are operating and the service providers within the slums, and therefore the next bit, which is the local municipality who's making those key decisions. So there's kind of a chain of people that sit behind the data use. But yeah, I'd be really willing to talk to you more about that. If you're offline or something, you can drop your contact details in the Slack and in the chat, and I can respond. But yeah, really interesting question. Thank you for answering it. Laura, over to you for any additional comments.
Yeah, I think it would just be to emphasize on collaboration. So with open geospatial data, yes, even as it's more available, is that it can show you the state of things, and that ideally would be essential for a planner or for a government institution or an organization to be able to see what's ongoing on the ground and be able to make decisions. But there has to be someone or an entity bridging between the data sort of provider and the data use. So an example of circular sharing was within the OpenStreetMap community. There's been a lot of projects within informal settlements that are leveraging on the collection of open geospatial data for different purposes. I can just give a quick example of a project done by an organization here in Kenya called Map Kibera. And they did a project called Open Schools. And this is because for a long time, the government did not cater for schools that are within the Kibera informal settlement, just because they weren't aware that there were schools there. So they weren't included when it came to budgeting and all of that. So what happened is that the community then came in together to to actually map these schools and put them on an online platform called now Open Schools Kenya, and be able to add all these details. And the member of parliament was able to use this data to lobby for support. And initially, even though the community was sort of afraid of, because some of the schools were sort of informal, they're not officially registered, but they were able to get that support, and the project grew even out of this informal settlement to the entire country, to what is now Open Schools Kenya. So I think what I've seen is if we are able to bridge between the data production and to users, and to actually users that benefit these communities, then you're able to see how that is useful and how the data is updated and maintained regularly. So I'd say key on collaboration, especially for people like you say, like planners, if you're able to come in together and work with organizations that are working in the geospatial space, specifically the open geospatial, open mapping spaces, then you're able to see the value of how open data can support planning for such communities that are often left behind.
Yes, thank you very much, panelists. And I think you raise very important and fundamental responses towards how, of course, Chris, and coming from a planning perspective, can be able to utilize open geospatial data. I know one of the key areas where spatial planning activities are heavily loaded financially is actually on the data collection component. And you find from time to time, and particularly with the lack of open geospatial data, you find a lot of duplicatory efforts that are mostly taken into the planning phases. So when, for instance, a county or a city like Kisumu is maybe looking to do some county spatial planning, then they start from the data collection phase or the creation of the baseline information, but processes which are usually very, very capital intensive. And yet maybe other players, particularly coming from the different sectors. For instance, if I was to give an example, in the health industry, you find a lot of NGOs or international organizations who've collected a lot of data over many years, and this data is actually never available maybe for utilization by other public entities. And so from country to country and from region to region, you're beginning to see the influx of maybe policies and strategies that are giving incentives to even the international players or individual or private sector players to actually contribute some of the data products from some of the programs they implement to ensure that that data is actually available even to governments, local actors, and to any other person who might want to use it for other extra or last mile processes. And I think this goes a long way to speak into the push that we're all having, looking holistically at it in terms of how do we actually enable a thriving open geospatial data community? How do we ensure that some of the data sets that are in the custody of different entities are all put together? Are we thinking around creating incentives? Do we have very useful success stories from entities that have developed or modeled proper incentives to ensure that there is that clear delivery? Or is it a challenge that we are actually still speaking into? And that, I think, leads us to the next set of questions, where we would like to understand some of the challenges. And I think the panelists, while speaking to the introductory remarks and also the response to the initial session, were able to capture some of the challenges. And in particular, Sophie talked about at one point the distrust. So are these some of the challenges that, of course, you've taken note of, particularly in this space? Putting a lot more emphasis on the distrust within open geospatial data and its availability, that simply because it's open and free, then somebody begins to think that it's actually probably not the right or the correct or the true indication of what is happening on ground. So maybe if we start with you, Sophie, you can speak into some of the challenges, bringing in a lot more in terms of what has been happening in the last 5 years. My expectation really for that specific session was to understand the way the overall sector is looking at it and how the last 5 years have impacted the key challenges of non-availability or inaccessibility of open geospatial data and its operationalization.
Yeah, so this is a big one, and just given my position within HOT and my experience in the kind of community development aspect of this work, I'm going to talk about direct challenges that the contributors have to open data, and the reason why is because about a year and a half ago now, at the GeoNG conference hosted by CARTONG, which is a French-based organization who do lots of work in some of the Francophone countries in East and Southern Africa. We worked with them to understand what the barriers to sustainability were for some of the contributors. Now, I think this is a really important angle to look at because, again, as I mentioned earlier, I deeply care about the person behind the data, the person behind the technology. And many of the groups that are contributing through citizen-generated data, many of them face daily challenges to get their data seen. And there are several reasons for that. And in collaboration with CARTONG, HOT hosted the Satellite Sustainability Exchange, which was a peer exchange, knowledge exchange session. And actually Map Kibera, who Laura mentioned earlier, were there. And we sat together and we discussed some of these challenges. And the three biggest challenges that came up, number one was, as you say, Vivian, trust and integrity of the data itself. And I'm just looking at Pamela's question in the chat as well, and I'm going to talk to that a little bit as well around data quality. Often much of the data that goes into citizen-generated technology is not the highest of quality. So like I said at the beginning, we really need to invest in the volunteers themselves and in the validators, so the people who check that the initial work that's been done is of high quality. And those two kind of components, if they work together, the assumption that we have is that the data will be high quality. But the reality of it is that things are constantly changing. The landscape's constantly changing. The imagery we have is constantly, well, the imagery itself isn't changing, but what we have access to is changing. So I think the investment in people is, again, a really important component of how we make sure that this data is trusted. So that's the first thing. So the actual quality of the data. The second thing was the ongoing retention of volunteers to contribute, to continue to contribute. Because what we've found in much of our activities is that we get really, really great people fresh out of university, you know, want to expand their skills. We work with them, build up their skills in contributing to open geospatial data. And then they find a really great job. Then they go and do their job, and this kind of the part that they were playing in the volunteerism, or like that in that kind of community, there's a really big gap, and this happens across the globe with many of the communities that we're working with, in that those people that are contributing to open data often see it as a kind of stepping stone to be able to progress themselves and get, you know, better jobs, better skills, better asset management, etc. So I think that's a really important part of it. So how can we do both? Because we don't want someone to not, you know, progress professionally and personally in lieu of contributing to open data, but we do want to continue that. So as part of the work that we're doing at HOT is really looking at volunteer retention and how do we incentivize mappers in a way that is empowering, that's exciting, where they continue to be engaged. And the Spatial People Network, I'll put the links to it in the chat, is one way in which we're doing that. So that's the first challenge. That's the second challenge. So we've got trust in data, we've got retention of volunteers, and then the third is kind of the collection of case studies. So proving or finding evidence for open geospatial data genuinely having an impact on the lives of local people. And as Laura said earlier, a huge part of this is about collaboration, because you need a data user or someone that says, yes, I use this, I don't know, this base map that has buildings and roads on it to make some decisions about an early warning flood monitoring system. Like, that's a proven use case. We can directly connect the development of the flood monitoring system to the availability of data on the map. But getting those data users is really difficult, considering the first two challenges that we have. So I think it's very much a you know, identifying these challenges with the communities that are facing these challenges was a really great learning curve, I think, for HOT and also for many of HOT's partners, because what we can see now is, okay, well, where are the areas of investment? And when I say investment, I don't just mean providing granting, but I also meaning saying, okay, well, where do we need to work with UN governments to lobby for for governments or UN bodies to lobby for the use of open data? Where do we need to invest our efforts there? How do we invest our efforts working with community-based organizations, CBOs, to help them to integrate some of their you know, like data quality challenges in their data work streams? So it's that kind of the understanding of these challenges. I don't see it as like a blocker, but absolutely see it as an opportunity for us to be able to be agile, to be flexible, and invest in different stages of the data use process. That's all from me. Back to you, Vivian.
Thank you, Sophie. I think it's good to hear the perspectives coming, of course, from the challenges. A lot more softer, a lot harder. I think it requires, I think the emphasis I took away from that was the need for a collaborative approach into some of this development, because that is one of the key areas. A lot of entities are actually working in silos. And to hand it over back to Andre, could you please speak into the challenges, maybe from UN Economic Commission for Africa perspective, or any other experiences, key challenges you've actually seen? Because I know you've done a lot of work, particularly when you mentioned, of course, working with UN GGIM initiatives and the different frameworks that you're also trying to set up. What are the key challenges you've seen in the last 5 years?
Thank you, Vivian. There are a lot of challenges, if I may say like that, but let me pick one or two because of the time constraints. The first one is the question I'm asking, where are the data? Because, you know, there are so much or so many data sets available across the African continent or on the African continent. But if you want to look at this information, you may have a lot of problems, a lot of challenges, because my sense is that most of the data, apart some of the fundamental geospatial data set being developed by national mapping agency, by country, and in many instances, they don't still have all the fundamental geospatial data set that are required for the sustainable development goal. And you know that the UNGJM process has defined 15 thematic area of building fundamental geospatial data set, 14 area of building fundamental geospatial data set at national level. Most of the data have been several project-specific mapping activity, collecting the data for a specific purpose. Either it can be for urbanization, for census, or for a limited local project. And all this data have been often very sporadic, if I may say like that, and have been usually tended to meet the minimum requirement or need of a specific project, a particular project. So finding this data in a more systematic and consistent way is one of the biggest challenge I see in terms of making data open to everyone. And as you know, institutions in the north, I might say in the western side of the globe, hold much of the data, much of the African data with little or sometimes no access to users in Africa. Not maybe because they are not willing to share it, but because we lack the appropriate infrastructure, the necessary capacity to be able to appraise the data from abroad to our day-to-day need or activity. This is one. The second one is, my sense is the lack of being together, meaning competition for power, especially at national level. I said it before, but let me emphasize, put an emphasis on that, because we have seen many institutions producing the same data with different specification, and these data are not matching to each other. And this is a critical challenge in terms of making or sharing this data openly. And of course, I agree with Sophie on the retention part of the capacities. Not only the retention, but also the recognition of the people we have trained on geospatial, so that they can continue applying their knowledge, their skill, and their capacity in the various sectors, especially from the government side. This is also an impediment to ensuring that people can make the data open and accessible to any users. And of course, at the end of the day, now that we are moving slowly to hyperlocal data, meaning that we are collecting data from the very local way, this create and is for me a challenge in terms of opening the data to any users, a kind of ethical and sovereignty imperative for the responsible use and handling of data that are more and more sensitive, because the more you disaggregate at the local level, the more the data becomes sensitive, because you have access to some information that are critical to individual, to groups, or to area where you shouldn't collect this kind of data. And of course, such a challenge speak to what kind of mechanism we put in place, like a data sharing principles, so that we can create, collect, analyze, and store the data. It's very critical and essential. And of course, this will not happen until we have a very clear ethical use of the data with respect to privacy, intellectual property right, and also liability. If you put on the if you open data that are some impact on an individual, on a group, or a community, then you should be held liable of disclosing this kind of data. And those are some of the key challenges in terms of ensuring that data are open and available to anyone who wants to use it. And of course, we tend to consider, because it's open, it might be free. It's free for maybe from the user's perspective, but it might not be free from the producer perspective. We pay, we give the money so that we can collect the data that we need. And this is a critical challenge and is not yet solved globally and nationally in the African context. Over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for highlighting, of course, those challenges with regards to the issues on the sensitivity, the data sharing principles available, the incentives that are there. For instance, who's paying, who's not paying, what sort of level, to what level is it actually free, the data
Hi, is anyone else experiencing challenges with Vivian's mic?
Yes, she's breaking.
Sorry, I got internet connectivity. I was disconnected, but I think I was just summarizing some of the key points from Andre on the data protection, data standardization aspects, as well as you know, some of the trade-offs that lie off in this kind of initiatives. I'll basically now introduce Laura. Laura, maybe share with us some of the key challenges from your experience. Very quickly.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
I think Sophie and Andrea have covered most of the challenges that you see in the space. But probably what I could just add is on ethical considerations when it comes to opening up geospatial data, making it accessible. I think there hasn't been a lot of work when it comes to coming up with standards that can be sort of borrowed and followed globally. I think what I've only seen is what was released a couple of years ago. I think something called Ethical Geo, who worked on a locus charter that came up with like principles to consider when it comes to working with data ethics in the geospatial space. But I think we've seen a number of cases where the open geospatial data has had some sort of privacy concerns, when it comes to like sharing sensitive information that could be used for things like surveillance and discrimination. So I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. And I think that also aligns well with what Andre was sharing on policies, especially locally within our different countries, and also regionally, especially within the African continent. Other than that, I think also when it comes to adoption, it might look like there's a lot of work ongoing, but I think there's still a lot more when it comes to adoption by government entities. So I think also something that Andre mentioned with their work at UNECA is on like NSDIs, because at the moment, I think also what has been shared before is that there's a lot of work being done independently. So at times you get a lot of data, but it's not data that you can easily work with just because it's all different, but all on the same things with different organizations. So, but I think when we have things like NSDIs being adopted by more governments, especially within the governments within the continent, I think we can see a lot more usable data that's in a standardized format. And those are the two that I can add for now. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm surprised no one actually spoke about the lack of financial challenges. I know Andre said that there's numerous examples. Maybe we'll actually get to hear from the audience, and particularly I'm hoping that they're actually not data consumers, but also data producers, so that if anyone has specific comments regarding some of the specific challenges, I think would be happy to hear. I think because of time, maybe you can be sharing some of the questions in the chat. Feel free to share some of the questions in the chat. We will have some few moments at the end to ask maybe you to take the floor from the audience to raise your last questions. But I think for now, we've got to move on to the last round of session where we get to unpack a lot more of what the future holds for the geospatial, open geospatial community. So we would like to hear from the panelists a lot more into the future opportunities with regards to the advancements in the technology and the availability of open geospatial data, and how we can basically better engage to prepare and keep up and adopt these advanced techniques and the future open geospatial data. What really are the new innovations that are coming into? So we basically like to pick your minds on the insights and the way forward with regards to what the future holds for the open geospatial data community. So I'll start off with Sophie. I don't know if I lost connection now.
A bit, yeah.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Vivian. Can you repeat the question?
Yes, so the question really is to just assess what are your thoughts really on the future opportunities within the geospatial space, what you think the next decade or the next couple of years would bring forth with the advancements of open geospatial technologies.
Yes, so I'm going to end on what I've already preached on. So for me, we can't just invest in technologies in the future. We need to invest in the people contributing to the technologies. So for me, this isn't so much about the kind of, because we know that technology is advancing at a rate that is incredible. The introduction of AI and machine learning into our standard practices is becoming ubiquitous across not only the industry, but across kind of technology usage broadly across the world. So I think that one of the things we need to make sure that we're doing as we kind of move along with this technological advancement is just making sure that we're investing in people as much as we are in the tech, and providing opportunities for people to be able to engage in the technologies and really be able to facilitate that. I think it's exciting. I think the potential for geospatial data is huge. I think that we are in a really exciting kind of moment where things are going to progress and they're going to be more interesting applications, more innovation, more opportunity. And as we kind of work with that technology and that advancement, we also need to make sure that we are having the right legislation, the right regulation around it, as Laura said earlier, making sure we're protecting people. We've got protection frameworks, we've got all of those things in place. That means that this data is used in a safe way, it's used in an inclusive way, and it's not used for any sort of malicious purposes. I think there is a risk of that, but I think that we as a community can really work to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I know that there are initiatives happening across the OpenStreetMap community that really are kind of embedding some of those practices in place. So just those 2 points from me. Number one, we need to invest in the people that are contributing to the technology, and two, we need to make sure we have a strong protective legislation that sits around the data use.
Thank you. So we roll on swiftly to Andre. Any specific opportunities that you see, future opportunities for open geospatial data?
Yes, of course, I cannot agree more with Sophie on the issue that the future is there by empowering the community to do much as possible by themselves. I believe this is where we are heading to. The second aspect is the integration of various data stream, statistical, spatial, and other data, so that we have a kind of ubiquitous availability of data that is accessible to anyone, anywhere, and anytime. I believe we'll see more and more seamless continuity in service delivery. And the third aspect I'm seeing also is business intelligence and advanced analytics. I believe that analytics is becoming essential as the volume of data generated by our devices, Internet of Things, mobile devices, social media increase. And we have a very huge pool of structured and even unstructured data that need to be analyzed and extract the insight, the actionable information. And my sense is that analytics will become embedded everywhere, often in an invisible manner. We'll have it in our smartphone, and we have seen a beginning of that. If you go into Google Maps, you can sort all the restaurants across your home, and then the system will provide you with this kind of location of this place. So it will be part of our day-to-day life, and maybe this is where things are. And of course, all these things will happen if we have the comprehensive and systematic frameworks with related policies put in place prior to all these things. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. Laura, any comments, any opportunities, future opportunities?
I think for me, I'd only mention that, I think it's really exciting, the AI machine learning conversation and spaces that are ongoing right now. I think there's a lot of room for embracing those spaces, especially even this year, I think, or maybe between 2020 and now, I think we've seen organizations like Google and Microsoft releasing sort of machine learning generated data that we could use, and they've released this openly. But I think what would be keen to see is how we are actually combining this with like our human intelligence to improve the data sets that we have, and not just using it blindly. So I'm really looking to see how AI and machine learning sort of improve the space and make even more data available. But also, I think a lot of, I think you mentioned funding. I think a lot of funding coming into the space to make sure a lot of the open data projects, open science projects are actually sustainable. I think, yeah, I agree, it's still a very huge challenge. I think we've seen a lot of projects actually sort of dying just because of the lack of funding to make them sustainable. So much more investment into the space financially to make sure that actually these projects are running for longer. And I think with that sort of stability, then we might see more usage and more trust in these data sets. Other than that, I think even more capacity building and collaborations between different entities just to make sure as well that data is being used for good within our different communities. Yeah.
Thank you. I think I cannot go without emphasizing that all of you have given us very useful insights into what the future holds. And I think the power of all this imagination is actually driven by what we are currently already seeing in terms of the evolution in this space. And so it's been very great to actually hear a lot more insights in the past, evaluating what has happened in the past, evaluating what is currently happening, some of the challenges we are all consistently experiencing, but a lot more exciting, of course, when you start thinking about the future. And I think the future of open geospatial technologies is very much likely to evolve. I think it's actually poised to evolve a lot more faster than other maybe sectors that you would actually think around, and particularly just the imagination of how technologies and advancements in the various, be it Earth observation technologies, be it in situ data collection, be it miniaturized sensors such as IoT sensors that are helping us to collect or monitor different phenomena, and these advancements practically getting us into understanding a lot more how our world is functioning. So of course, there's a lot more conversations around the aspects of digital twins, around the aspects of creating a lot more 3D based open geospatial data, so that you not only see the location in terms of the X and the Y, the longitude or the latitude, but you actually even begin to see the realities. So these aspects of having, open geospatial realities, having an application, for instance, if I was think about Uber, where if you're navigating or you're even through Google Maps, as you navigate through a specific environment or road network, whatever you see on the phone when you look outside of your car window is exactly what you also will be seeing in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of the trees or the environmental elements within that same environment. I think we're really living in very exciting times. Of course, aspects to do with artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms that are continuously elevating this space, continuously also aiding us to be able to develop a lot more open geospatial data in very quicker ways. I think traditionally, geospatial data used to take a lot of time. The human capacity, a lot of people had to sit down, collect this data, digitize, maybe in the form of desktops, but now we're beginning to see a lot more entry points in the automated systems, where now it's no longer going to be just static data available that was captured very many years ago, but you can consistently have tools, services, and products that are looking into near real-time service delivery. So that evolution of not just only having open geospatial data provision, but having open geospatial data services, having platforms that are going to serve as, as services, implementing the automation of these near real-time models to ensure that we actually are getting close to what is a reality in our world, predictably the next game changers of the next decade in this space. I think it's been quite insightful, and because of time, I would like to do a last round of questions, maybe from the audience. Any comments, questions, you can just put your hand up. And then we can capture that very quickly. As you also think through the questions, maybe I will confirm from Chris whether his comments and questions from the previous session were well captured.
Thanks. I will just add one question in the finding that was raised up there.
Yes.
I think whoever pays for this data might be controlling what they want to get out of it. And in many occasions, government don't, in our Africa, in Kenya, and county government, national government, they rarely pay for the data. They rarely invest in this. They always feel that if you look at their budget, this provision is lacking. They will always wonder, oh, can somebody support us? So when you pay, when you don't have a priority thinking, or you don't allocate resources in a particular agenda or item, and somebody fund it for you, is it really your priority, or is it just something you are doing to ticking a box because a requirement for giving funding? At times, I feel that institutions like World Bank do push African countries, or especially the devolved framework of which Kenya is now in the process, so that counties are now developing spatial plans without resources to implement them. So spatial plan remain a document which is done because it's a requirement by external agencies, but it does not serve the interests of the locals. I don't know to what extent this thing can be made to be agenda for local government or for county government, so that they also must be made to fund it so that they believe in it. Otherwise, we'll be doing it, the donor will be funding it, but it will not anyway be linked to issues of social development that we are suffering from. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. You're speaking a lot more into the institutionalization of some of these data collection initiatives. Are there specific incentives? Where are maybe some of the governments you have quoted there not particularly taking this initiative seriously? Maybe we can hear from Andre.
This is a recurrent question we haven't been able to solve for since the beginning. Who is paying? Nationally, national mapping agencies are getting resources from their government, but it's not always enough to cover what is needed and required to build up-to-date data at the level of resolution or at the level of detail that are needed to action on the ground. Now there is a discussion on how national mapping agency can develop what we call financial appropriation framework to mobilize resources for the geospatial activity. There is no fit for all model of mobilizing resources. It depends on the country, but they are now aware of the need for them to develop business cases so that they can sell themselves, mobilize resources, even sell their product in a way that they attract resources that help them to create the product without even charging the users. But the question is still on the table to see how we develop a good vehicle of mobilizing resources for geospatial activity in Africa. And as you know, so far it doesn't arouse political interest at national level, even at the global level. At the global level in the continent, we are looking at putting in place a kind of overarching mechanism to speak to those who are paying, meaning ministers or even head of state, or even identifying African geospatial champion in Africa, a head of state who is pretty interested in this kind of domain and can promote it. I believe this is maybe where a lot of action is still needed. Otherwise, as you rightly put it, the person who is paying will at any time orient or direct the way you will collect and build your data set. And we need maybe as African country to get rid of always how do you call it, putting our hands to request resources from the others and be able to generate by ourselves the needed resources. We have the resources. It's maybe we don't have yet the political buy-in so that they can understand that geospatial is at the same level like road infrastructure, school infrastructure, health infrastructure, and so on and so forth. This is where we still need to do some awareness raising, conscientizations, and explanations so that they got it at the end of the day. Since I have the floor, may I quickly respond to one of the questions asking to explain how open geospatial data can be used to improve data quality?
Yes.
From the National Mapping Agency perspective, you know that they find it difficult to update their data. We had a meeting 2 weeks ago in Addis with some national mapping agency, and some of them are saying, okay, some of our basic topographic maps are from the 80s. The recent ones are from the 90s. And we all know that Africa is transforming very fast in terms of urbanizations, in terms of infrastructure development, and still sitting on data from the 90s is a big problem in terms of using this data for planning purposes. So I see that the crowdsourcing and community-generated data can be useful for them to do the updating they still don't have, but we don't have yet the mechanism to collect, compile the data that might be recorded by specific citizen and embed it into their mapping workflow to ensure that they can update the data. But this is one way open geospatial data can be used to improve the data quality and even to amplify the availability of geospatial data at national level. Thank you, and over to you, Vivian.
Thank you very much. I know we are running short of time, and so I'm going to request maybe Sophie, if she's still here with us, to maybe just respond to any of the questions or just give her last remarks.
Yes, I agree that funding is a huge challenge, and I agree with everything that Andre said as well. I think the thing that we can kind of do as a collective, and this is a bit of a kind of call for action to everyone in the room and in fact beyond, is if we keep talking about how integral open data is to this region, to the people that we're working with, to the decision makers in our region, in our countries, if we keep talking about it and keep sharing and keep making sure that open data is visible and the impact of open data is visible, then I think that there's going to be more opportunities in terms of opportunities for funding in this space. And I also think that as kind of global advocates, and as we, have conversations with organizations like Overture, with national governments, et cetera, that really will provide a strong foundation for funding in this space to be available. And yes, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to leave. I've got another appointment. But I just wanted to extend my thanks to Vivian and to the D4D network and everyone that was involved in organizing this work, this roundtable. It's been great to have discussions. I'm looking forward to hearing what comes next, and looking forward to hearing what everyone's up to in future. I will be in Nairobi in January for quite some time, so if anybody wants to meet, please get in touch and we can do that. And best of luck everyone for all of your work and endeavors, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you very much, Sophie, for agreeing to join us today and for your very useful submissions. So extend our greetings back to your team at the Open Humanitarian OpenStreetMap, and I think we'll keep you posted on the next steps. And we look forward to also connecting with you physically through the D4D networks in the coming days. Thank you. All right, so I won't end this, of course, without asking or requesting Laura to just give us her final submissions. If there are any comments, particularly, I see Meron had a question, but before we come back to you, maybe you can share with us that question on the chat, Meron, Tekli.
I was clapping actually.
Oh, you were clapping. Sorry. Okay. All right. Okay, then. So Laura, over to you.
Yeah, I think much has been said. I think for me, my closing remarks would just be there's a lot to be done, but also there's so much that we've already done so far. So really looking to see how the space grows, to making sure we have more available data that different entities and groups can use for good. And I saw a question by Pamela on the chat. I think she was asking how we can use open geospatial data to improve data quality. Well, I think it depends with the aspect of data quality that you're looking to improve, but some of the things that came to mind were things like completeness. So say if you are an entity and you already have data that you already use on a day-to-day basis, I think we can look at what's available openly and see how that can complement our data to make sure we have more complete data sets, whether that means like the addition or inclusion of attributes that had not yet been previously collected but are openly available, but can also look like making sure that our data is up to date. So good examples would be even for planning departments that work a lot with like data on building footprints, as opposed to maybe going in back to keep on digitizing. If we look at AI-generated data, we can use that to quickly update our data sets as well. So yeah, for me, I can say when it comes to data quality is on completeness, and also just having data sets that you can compare with to see how they differ with what different entities already have. Other than that, I think, I'll also just say thank you. I think the discussion was really amazing, and looking forward to similar discussions and what's more to come within the open geospatial space. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Andre, kindly take it off with your last sentiments and comments.
No. It used to be a very good time of discussion and sharing of our individual understanding on what open data can be. my takeaway is that, of course, we need to find a way of putting in place some guiding principles on the data sharing mechanism. If we can get it established at the continental or global level, that will be good, and then every country can adapt it to its own circumstances. But at the end of the day, ensure that we have an ethical and a responsible use and handling of geospatial data set. Whatever paid or open or free, whatever, that's maybe where we should start. And thank you so much for the opportunity to sit in this panel. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I will end with your last remarks there also on the open geospatial data, free, but of course to see that we have a community that responsibly and ethically utilizes this geospatial data sets. And I think because of the very, very insightful comments that we've had from, of course, the flow, from the questions, from the panelists, my role is very simple at this point to actually thank all of you for staying with us this long. In some parts of where I'm particularly based right now, it's Friday evening. It's very late, and I apologize for going overboard, of course, with the time. But I think the discussion was a lot more, and it can always keep going on and on and on, because a lot of the panelists we had here, all three of them, are very passionate about what they do. There are people I've also engaged with and learned a lot from, of course, over the last couple of years. And so it is the commitment for me that they've actually given into being able to join us today and share some of this wealth of experience and knowledge for all of us to benefit from. I think as an industry, we're really looking to ensure that we keep pushing every other day, and that open geospatial data, open geospatial frameworks, and open geospatial initiatives are definitely going to be a huge part, a very critical part of our daily undertakings, and particularly find its rightful place within the various national government or countries where we come from. I think at this juncture, I'll definitely like to hand it over back to the D4D team, and so that they can basically close this up. So thank you very much for being able to stay with us all through, and I look forward to the next steps on how we continue to engage in the coming days. Over to you.
Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, Vivian, Andre, Laura, and everyone who managed to join us for this event. I would like to add that Vivian is currently finalizing a chapter update on the state of open for the second edition of the State of Open Data. So keep an eye out on our website for that chapter when we release the blog version of it, and it will be re-released when we release the whole second edition. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this is the beginning of a lot more conversations, enriching conversations that will lead to more engagement. I hope people have collected each other's emails while we have this conversation going on. And I hope that if you have any questions to any of the panelists, you can also directly email them or email them to us, and we'll definitely communicate. So thank you so much for your patience and for joining us. This is the end of our conversation.
Thank you.